This presentation is about the city of Memphis. We have started using interim design strategies as a regular basis for how we do a lot of our infrastructure improvements in our city. Does anybody here actually know anything about Memphis other than the fact that Elvis came from Memphis? No. All right. One person. All right. So Memphis is 324 square miles of land. I superimposed that over a portion of Maine. We have 652,717 residents as of the last census estimates. We're the 25th largest city in the nation based off of our population size. And our density is about 2,014 people per square mile, which is less than the state of Connecticut. If you take our metropolitan area in, our entire metropolitan area includes parts of Mississippi, parts of Arkansas, and a portion of western Tennessee. Our population density drops down to about 400 people per square mile. So we're not a very dense area. Our city was a city that was a very large city back in the 1800s, the early 1900s, and then it just kind of sprawled out. You have the same number of people that are just kind of gradually moving their way around. So we're a wonderful case if you ever want to study urban sprawl. A city of this size, we have 7,300 miles of roadway within our city. We have 928 traffic signals, 180,000 traffic signs, and back in 2010, the city of Memphis did not have any bike infrastructure. We were named by Bicycling Magazine 2 years in a row as the worst city in the United States for bicyclists. We're still being named as one of the top 10 cities for dangerous fatalities for pedestrians. It was at this point that the city started kind of changing its mind about how it was going to build and how it was going to function. It kind of been on the same path for a long period of time. Memphis, with these residents, our poverty rate is like 28% in the city of Memphis. We have 12% of our homes, despite being this suburban, sprawled out area, 12% of homes do not have cars, do not have access to cars. And a lot of our city is built all where you don't have combined networks of grids, so it's not a straight path for a transit agency to go down the road. Some of those bus trips are an hour, 2 hours for somebody to jump on a bus and be able to make it to work. So the city started changing its mind about how it was going to function. Now the city is one of the largest freight industries in the entire world. We have, it says 58,000, but it's probably a little bit more than that when you tie in some of the other entities. But FedEx is headquartered in Memphis. We have the world's largest cargo airport. We have 5 Class 1 railroads. We have the largest intermodal terminal for a railroad that's outside of the seawater ports like Alameda or New York. We have the fourth largest inland port, and we have 4 interstates that connect within the city of Memphis. The bridge that crosses the Mississippi River for the interstates is the highest volume freight bridge in the entire US. So this is kind of the culture that our entire city was built around. A tractor trailer was a standard design vehicle. Everybody wanted to make sure that those entities were able to function and be able to move around. You also have the fact that people in the Memphis, despite how far they move out, they're moving further and further out, making a 25, 30 mile, one-way trip to work, and it takes 22 minutes. And they think that's a long time because they never go anywhere other than Memphis. So making a change is a big mindset. It's a huge cultural change to get people to understand these. The first thing that we started on was in 2010, we started building the Shelby Farms Green Line. We were able to purchase right away from CSX Railroad to convert that into a multi-use trail that was 8 miles. It went from a park in Memphis that's a 4,500 acre park that's in kind of the heart of the metropolitan area and goes into kind of our midtown, our older area of our town. And this was really the first time that people saw anything where they were getting on bikes or walking and everything. We have a very high obesity rate, a lot of health problems in our city. So like getting the people active and getting them to understand these things and start thinking this way, this was the first time that they ever even thought about that. People didn't own bikes, didn't think about bikes, didn't even consider this as being a form of transportation. When we were putting this in, the homes that this runs behind are extremely wealthy homes. The houses are worth a lot of money, and they were scared that the people that where this ends is a very low income neighborhood. I think the average family makes somewhere around $14,000-$15,000 a year. And so they were worried that those people were going to come out of that neighborhood and start ransacking all their houses and robbing them by jumping over the back of the fence. That hasn't been the case. Their house values have gone through the roof all along this corridor because of it being there. We also have the Wolf River Greenway, which this was being built along the Wolf River, which is a tributary of the Mississippi through the city of Memphis. The Wolf River is, this project started back in about 2010, and it will be a 22-mile long pathway throughout the entire city by 2019. It should be complete. So a lot of people go out and use it. My daughter likes to rest on one of the bridges. She's very restful. I think she was only about 1.5 at that time, so I don't really know where she got the whole hand behind the head thing. But in 2010, we also had an advocacy group that started doing a Better Blocks project in the city. It was a new face for an old Broad. The street is Broad Avenue. And back in the late 60s, the state tried to run the interstate through an 800-acre park within the city of Memphis. They sued the state and sued the FHWA. That went to the Supreme Court, and that ruling is why we have to have public process for transportation projects. That is also the reason why we have 4F documentation for public projects. So anytime that I'm dealing with these same individuals that did that, they like to remind me on a regular basis. But this road was the main thoroughfare that the interstate that dead ends right here, it kind of killed that business. It cut this off from the neighborhood, completely having this shut down. When they were doing this project, only 2 of these businesses were actually open and active, all the way up and down the street. There was nobody anywhere nearby. You had to cross a 7-lane road to get to this from either direction, so people did not go here. They did this tactical urbanism. They went out with paint rollers, they painted the street, they activated the stores, they gave people space. They talked to the developers and the owners of the buildings to go in, activate the space, supposedly for a day, and it ended up being 6-month contracts where they were able to stay in there and work as a business. And we worked on business incubation techniques to get them to be where they could stay there. For this event, 15,000 people showed up for this event for this day. And this is really the first time they saw bike lanes on a street in the city of Memphis. And it was the first time that people actually saw that this could be something that would be beneficial and wouldn't hurt them. So this is we have a grant to complete this project, and it's going to be built, should be at the end of this summer, and it's going to be a 2-way cycle track that connects to that green line and then connects into that park. And so this entire way will be a 2-way cycle track. It's going to be the first one in Tennessee, I do believe. Nashville might have finished theirs before ours, but it's a tremendous difference. There's only 1 vacancy on this entire road now. All of these businesses are occupied. All the businesses have been retrofitted. People have gone in and fixed them up. They're starting to put residential units within that fabric. So it's becoming its own community, its own world. Madison Avenue was the first bike lanes that the city of Memphis actually actively started, and this was about 2010, 2011. This was an old kind of like clubs and different things like that. Billy Joel used to play in this area. The saloon area right there was the second TGI Fridays in America, was in that location. When they started reconstructing Bill Street back in the late 80s, this all just kind of died, and it's been sitting that way since that time. Well, the city came in, we were looking at putting bike lanes in. It was a 4-lane cross section with parking on either side. We're going to change it to a 3-lane cross section with parking and bike lanes. People thought that this was going to completely shut their businesses down. It's very hard for people to understand. You take out a lane, you reduce the friction factor so people are going to actually function better. The things are going to work better by getting rid of people stopping in that inside lane to turn left and everybody having to go around them. So we went through this process. These buildings, a lot of these buildings were all vacant. You had empty lots and different things that have been cut in. A lot of the corners were not active anymore. Once the project was in, developers saved this from being torn down, and they rebuilt all this section. The parking lot that was behind the building, they turned into a plaza, and this area flooded all the time, so we had to build a stormwater detention basin, which we turned into a concrete underground basin and built a parking garage on top of it. This entire area is now occupied. I think the new face for an old bra was about $25 million of private investment. This is somewhere around $360 million have been spent in this area so far. It's also now our theater district. There's been a number of different theaters. The ballet company is moving back in town from being out in the suburbs. So it's a very active and vibrant place. And the only way that these people saw this happening was because of these activation techniques on the roadways. All the bars and everything else are all constantly packed. Memphis Crosstown was the first active kind of tactical urbanism event that the city did. Bloomberg Philanthropies gave the city a lot of money to start an innovation team, and they were looking, this was kind of the first place that they looked at. There was a group of people that were wanting to redevelop this 1.5 million square foot old Sears distribution warehouse that had been empty since 1988. The street looked like this. Most of these businesses were all empty. So we had a design, we designed everything, we set up, we have a program we call Memphis is the tactical street urbanism. Mem Shop is like activating of retail spaces, and then we have Mem Mobile, which is creating like mobile trucks, food trucks, and things of that nature which didn't exist in Memphis before this happened. So we activated all the spaces. We had a movie screen at night and stages and all kinds of fun stuff, put out bike lanes. Over 20-something thousand people showed up that day. It was the first time they were doing tours in the building. It's the first time anybody had been in the building in a long time. That's the building today. They have retrofitted it. It's now at about 1.2 million square feet because of the light wells and the changing the interior of the building. There's 450 residents in there. St. Jude has got offices for some of their staff. A lot of the medical facilities have all moved in there. There is a charter school that's built out of there. A bunch of art institutes have art galleries. The entire thing is already leased out. All the surrounding businesses now are being retrofitted, being leased out, and the roadway is going to be resurfaced this year, and what was out there for that event will be on the roadway after it's resurfaced. At the same time, we were kind of working on a complete streets plan, and this is about the time that I started working at the city. I did the designs for the crosstown, and I started at the city the week after that because we didn't want me starting with liability issues doing the traffic control and the designs for the roadway. So I started the week after that, so the city wouldn't be held liable if anybody decided to not be able to drive in a straight line. But the Complete Streets group, we had a formal group that was the builders associations, developers. It was a group of about 28 of us that were sitting in a room arguing about sentence structure for a long time to come up with this little executive order. But the big thing about this executive order, we were the 500th policy, so Smart Growth America, they celebrated because we just magically made that 500 mark. But this required us to do a manual about how we were going to implement this actually in the city. So we had a green print grant, and we hired a nonprofit group out of Chicago to help us develop this manual. The manual breaks everything down. A lot of this is very similar to Chicago's manual and some of the other manuals I've seen, but it's got very specific things. We have typology, street typology, so every street in the city has a typology, and we've done a modeling system, so we have a roadway regulatory plan that says this street should look this way, and that gives us an idea of how we're going to retrofit everything. But the biggest thing about it was the Chapter 5, the project delivery process. We had to go through and figure out how every project was done, and now we have a step of when someone's doing something, you have to qualify why you're not going to do something that's going to meet this manual. You have to talk about, we have communication plans and everything else, so you can track this stuff, and it's not just people going to our city council and the city council allowing them to make a modification. All of it's very public information. We also set up a prioritization system. So when we design a facility, it is designed based off of this characteristic. So if we don't have enough room for the pedestrian environment to meet PROAG standards, which is what the state has adopted, PROAG is proposed the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines. Pedestrians come first. We have to make the pedestrian fit in there, and everything else has to come after that. So everything is designed in this context and how this is going to work. We have also adopted a separate design vehicle, control vehicles. We have target speeds of like 25 miles per hour on our roads. There's designed for people to have to drive that speed, not that someone driving this vehicle, the top worst 15% of drivers have to make it around curves and things of that nature. So it's a vast change for us. These Memphis events have continued on and they've started picking up. We do about 3 or 4 of them every year. This is the Pinch District, and the Pinch District, you see that lovely pyramid at the end. That was our basketball arena back in the 90s. And this, closer to us, is St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The area in between that is the Pinch District. It was an old area that was built back in the mid-1800s in Memphis. A lot of it had got torn down during their urban renewal period and was all parking lots. So we activated the Main Street, which is this area with the trolley tracks here. I guess I have this little flasher thing, sorry. With the trolley tracks, and they did a one-day event out there. Now the thing with the Pinch District is St. Jude is in the middle of a $2 billion expansion, and our empty arena is now the largest Bass Pro Shop in the world. It's a 350,000 square foot retail store with a hotel built into it. It's got waterfalls and giant fish aquariums and all kinds of fun stuff. I'm not really a hunter or a fisher, but people are really happy about it. It's better than an empty building sitting there, I guess. But all the rest of this is gonna be, parts of this is St. Jude, a lot of it's gonna be mixed use development. And we're redoing all the roadways kind of based on these new concepts of the complete streets. And all of this is, construction is going to start on all of this year. So it's going pretty fast. And it's a pretty big change for a city that really hasn't had a lot of change in a long time. We've continued these Memphis events. We had Film Row, which is where they used to ship out all the Paramount movies, and all these places. We had all these old little warehouses. Mississippi Walkers down by Stax Museum, where Otis Redding, Isaac Hayes, Carla Thomas, there's a lot of recording people other than Elvis from Memphis. So that neighborhood down there it's definitely a economically disadvantaged area. And we activated that with some curb bump outs and different things that day, and all that stuff's still there. We have grants to actually build that out fully now. And Tom Shadyac, who was the director of Patch Adams and like Evan Almighty and a bunch of other movies, he is a professor at the U of M. He teaches a storytelling class, but he has purchased a bunch of property there, and he's building all types of, like a grocery store. This is a food desert. It's gonna be the first grocery store they've had. And so he's investing in that area. They've rebuilt Stax Academy, Stax Museum. They have record labels back down there. So this entire area is starting to come up. This area is also part of the big jump from People for Bikes. So this is the area of town that we're focused on, because our focus is on transit and equity within our systems, how to use the bicycle and pedestrian networks to get people places, because they don't have any way to get anywhere. Highland Street Walkers at our local university, the University of Memphis. And the University of Memphis currently has about $320 million of building projects and about $570 million of private investment around it, of like different residential facilities and everything else. One of our, I guess, bigger success stories lately is, because this is kind of taking the next step. We did a Memphis at a part of our city called The Edge. We did the installation, it's still out there. We do the installation, we activate the plazas, everything else. This all comes down. All these institutions around this are all big medical. Like the University of Tennessee Medical School is in Memphis. There's also Sun Studios is also right here in this neighborhood. So these cats were really, really worried about us blocking their bus parking area by building a loading zone, or a bump out there, which it was just to protect people in the crosswalk. They were parking buses on a crosswalk. So it was a lovely conversation that I got to have with a bunch of lawyers for a number of months, but it's all been worked out, and we're going forward with these projects. The medical district has formed a medical district coalition, and this coalition has hired consultants to redesign, have conceptual designs of every street within the medical district. The medical district is 8 institutions, very large hospitals, different people. So as we're doing projects within the city, we work with them to how we're going to retrofit the streets. This is that same intersection. And so we were resurfacing the intersections. I contacted the medical district people, and they let me know what they wanted out there. We did the striping, but all the planters, the red, epoxy gravel, all that stuff is things that the medical district put out there, and they're under a maintenance agreement to maintain this. We currently have 8 installations like this throughout the medical district, and every single street in the medical district will be retrofitted this way. So this will be there for at least 10 years. And as we get grants, we start rebuilding these things. We've got the grant from the Kresge Foundation for the Civic Commons program. So we have shut down Riverside Drive in Memphis, and we've put basketball courts and a skating rink out there. We have a food truck plaza. We're kind of gradually rebuilding all this stuff right now and interlinking everything. And this was one of the things that, as an engineer and talking to different people about how we're doing stuff, we're always so worried about our money. Like we are a very poor city. We do not have money to build what we need to build, to take care of what's already built out there. So we had a Tiger grant, which was going to repair our Main Street and then connect our Main Street to the Main Street in West Memphis, Arkansas. This bridge was a Union Pacific bridge. It used to have cantilevered roadways on the outside of it that were wooden. They caught on fire back in 1948 and they were never replaced. So you had the superstructure that was already there. As part of that grant, and really as part of a lot of private donations, we've built I think one of the longest pedestrian and bicycle paths on the side of across a riverway in the world now. This was something that we worked with Union Pacific, got them to agree to let us do this, and then a gentleman paid to have the bridge lit. So it seemed like a lot of money, which it wasn't our money that we were spending, it was private investors giving the money, but I see all these other problems in our city. But these things create hope. And they see this and they think that other great things are to come. They see all these small incremental changes. And for years and years, people didn't even pave their streets. We were on a 40-year paving cycle up until recently. We've gone from having $8 million to pave a year to having $18.5 million to pave. So people have never seen city employees in their neighborhoods at all. And now they're all of a sudden seeing this. And it's these small things and sometimes these big things that are changing the entire culture and the mindset of our entire city. And it's a pretty amazing thing to see, me being a Memphian growing up in this city and knowing what's happened there over all the years. So, anybody have?
We've got time for 1 or 2 questions. Go ahead.
It's always funny. This is a question I wanted to ask the person from New York too. Have either of you used the information that cyclists post on Strava to figure out where to put your bike paths?
So we use a lot of extra help for things. Like we're part of NACTO, and so we use NACTO to provide us a lot of support for things, IT, different groups, and then we use our local universities. We have 59,000 university students from our city, so you get a lot of help. We use Strava. We have a thing called Blue Toad, which is tracking Bluetooth devices throughout the city. We have spent pretty much every CMAQ dollar that's come into the city integrating our entire signal system, putting up mid-block counters, everything else, and we built an ITS system within our downtown, within our city hall. So that's actively being fed all this information. It can break everything down by different type of cyclists, people walking on the street, everything. We're changing all of our signals into camera actuation systems. We have cameras up. We have a lot of ways that electronically collect data pretty simply. It's an automated system when we have somebody that kind of reviews that and manages that program. And then we use the university has a large modeling capability, so they can take that data and they can model and project and help us work on how to change things and modify things with that data. But we use any app that we can find.
Great. Patrick, did you want to chime in?
Sure, pretty similar. There are a number of different sources that we're using. Steve mentioned several of them. Something else we are doing. We have looked at Strava, but it's just from a bike perspective, it's a really self-selecting group of people who are using that. So what we worry about is like planning only for the ultra athletic and sort of ignoring the people who are just out for an afternoon ride or riding for a utilitarian purpose. So, but yeah, we are actively looking at all methods of data collection electronically.
You can build a model of the systems, which I mean, models are not everybody's favorite thing, but you can build a low stress networking model that is built the same way as you kind of build a travel demand model. This is where people are going to go. How do you make that to where people are comfortable out there? And that prioritizes everything without you necessarily needing to know exactly where that person's leaving and going to on any given day. We use the university students to go door to door and ask a lot of questions.